Hi everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at some Pick 5 strategy for Wood Memorial Saturday at Aqueduct. Mike, we've had plenty of lean cards through this winter at Aqueduct, to say the least, February and March, a lot of small fields. Not the case with this Saturday card at Aqueduct. They put together a 13-race affair, plenty of big fields throughout the day, and this Pick 5 sequence really hinges around an intriguing edition of the Wood Memorial, a wide-open race that drew 12 runners.
Yeah, I agree. The Wood Memorial is wide open. To me, it was the toughest race of the sequence to try to decide who I wanted to like. I just don't really have a strong opinion in there. I'm trying to survive that one. But it's a strong series of Pick 5 series overall. And if you haven't looked at races 1 through 8 and you're only looking at 9, look at 1 through 8 too. This is a good card from top to bottom.
Yeah, plenty of interesting horses coming back. General Partner, who was a good horse for Chad Brown earlier in last year, and Crimson Light, who has that impressive debut winner coming from a mile back after blowing the stars. They're not in this Pick 5 sequence, but they are competing a little bit earlier in the day. Before we get to the handicapping, everybody, make sure to hit the like button on this video and also subscribe to the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We've got a lot of great content planned over the next few weeks leading up to the Kentucky Derby. You don't want to miss any of it, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Looking at this Pick 5 sequence, it comprises races 9 through 13. The 12th is the Wood Memorial, and there are 4 stakes in this sequence leading up to that Wood Memorial, which is the penultimate leg. The final leg, the 13th, is an allowance race for the New York Breds. We'll get to that at the end. It is one of the larger fields in the sequence. But, Mike, the first 3 stakes, I think each of them have 8 runners. Feels like a manageable one to put together. When I was going through this race, and maybe it's just my familiarity with a lot of these horses competing in New York, but I felt like the opinions kind of just jumped out at me in every race, maybe except the Wood Memorial, which was a little tougher to get to. But I didn't find this to be too difficult of a sequence to put together an affordable ticket.
Yeah, I had the same opinion you did. And I actually even feel like as far as the Wood Memorial goes, you might be a little firmer on your opinions in that race than I am. I really don't have a strong opinion there at all. So that's the race. Again, I just want to sort of try to get there and survive it if I can. Beginning, though, with the first leg of the Gazelle. I mean, I'm with you. It's kind of, I felt like it was kind of a manageable race. Maybe the big key to the whole thing is the 9 furlong distance.
For sure. This is going to be a test of stamina for these 3-year-old fillies that are prepping for the Kentucky Oaks. And maybe that's a feather in the cap of the number 2, Ballerina Doro, who I installed as the even money favorite on the morning line. She just feels like the horse to beat in this race. She's the most accomplished one coming in, Mike, and she's got that top effort that she achieved in the Demoiselle last year, going this same 9 furlong distance where she was second to Mohima, who at the time seemed like one of the early favorites for the Kentucky Oaks at the end of her 2-year-old season. Maybe things didn't quite pan out for her in her 3-year-old debut, but Ballerina Doro, she came back off the layoff last time in the Devona Dale. That was not the intended spot for her to come back. You might remember she was entered at the fairgrounds prior to that, came up with a temperature, so Chad Brown had to reroute to the Devona Dale to get the 2 preps in. Feels like she's supposed to be fitter for this race, and she's just doing something that she's already handled before.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, there's an argument to be made, and I know it may not look that way on paper, but there is at least a slight argument to be made that she's, even better as a turf horse. I guess that all remains to be seen, but she certainly ran really well in the Demoiselle the first time she was on dirt. And if she runs that race back, she'll just be, really hard to beat. And here you mentioned that that wasn't the intended race for her to return in at Gulfstream last time. It was also a Devona Dale that really wasn't run to suit her with a short field and not much pace going on. I can't say that I love the Devona Dale as a race overall, David. Don't want to be too hard on Ballerina Doro for the effort that she put in there, though.
Well, Mike, let's go to your grid for this race. And you definitely have respect for Ballerina Doro, and I think this is a race we're going to be pretty similar. But there is another horse that you want to use, the number 4, early on. And I'm wondering what your thoughts on her are, because I have a specific reason why I like her in this race. So I'll let you go first.
Yeah, first of all, I just think she's a horse who, I think if you just look at her on paper without watching her races, you feel like that she's just totally overmatched in a race like this. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's the case at all. I think she ran way better than it looks sprinting in those first 2 starts at Saratoga last summer. And then, when they finally stretched her out 2 starts back, I get that it probably wasn't the strongest field in the world, but she was way handier in there. She got a perfect trip in that race. And I thought she really ran, David. I think she really appreciated stretching out. The race last time in the Virginia Oaks, it's a 1-turn race. She got bumped at the start. I still thought that she ran really, really well in that race behind, by the way, a winner of that race fondly for Grant Motion, who I think has a chance to be really good as well. I think that's an underrated performance as well. To me, early on, is just the kind of horse I think she's way better than she looks on paper. I think she can get the right trip in here. And she was one of the horses in here where I wasn't that worried about the 9 furlongs. I can't say that about everybody.
Yeah, I think our take on early on is pretty similar here. I agree with you wholeheartedly on the trips. She did have a subtle trip going 3 back to that race at Aqueduct where she was just never in a comfortable position over that sloppy track and was really galloping out well at the end of that race. I agree on the maiden win. It was impressive. And last time out, Mike, it just kind of felt like Flavien Prat underestimated how much horse he had underneath him because he was losing position, taking her wide on the far turn, slotted her in behind a tiring horse at the top of the stretch. Like he wasn't expecting her to be there when he asked. And once he did get her in the clear and asked, it was almost like she ran out of ground at the end of that race, but she really was finishing. And she feels like a horse that is not, as you said, going to mind stretching out to this 2-turn 9 furlongs. She certainly doesn't have the size to her that Ballerina Doro has. When you see them on the track, I think you'll see Ballerina Doro is probably going to tower over early on, but she just really extends herself. And those are the kinds of horses that have those big loping strides that I think are going to be just fine going this 9 furlong distance. I've got her at 6-1 in the morning line. I hope that we get every bit of that. And we're both going to be keying on those two horses and hopefully getting through this leg with them. I did give a look to the 7 Pure Beauty because she really improved last time when they stretched out to the 2 turns at Gulfstream. And you can say that maybe that buyer of 78 was validated when the winner, Anna's Promise, came back to finish a pretty good second at the Gulfstream Park Oaks last week behind 5G. I just feel like maybe that was the day that you wanted her at 15-1, and now she's going to be maybe half that price against the tougher field here. So I couldn't get too excited about her, Mike, but just given the fact that it's Shug and he gets these horses to make incremental improvements, I didn't want to completely leave her off.
I thought she was another one too that, the 9 furlong distance could really work for her. So yeah, we'll see how it plays. I did think she had to move forward in here and I didn't use her. We'll tie this whole thing up at the end. But really, to me, David, is the 2 and the 4. I'm just going to sort of key on them. I threw a couple of probably bigger prices in there as defend horses. And we'll see, if I actually wind up playing it that way. But really, the 2 and the 4 were the 2 horses for me.
Let's move on to the next leg of this sequence. Race 10 is the Grade 2 Carter. This one carded at 7 furlongs, another field of 8 runners, and some horses that we're familiar with that have been competing in the dirt sprints through this winter at Aqueduct, Mike. But I think the center of this race is the shipper, the number 2, Quince Brew. I made him the 2-1 favorite on the morning line for this race, and he's just coming in having done very little wrong at his home track of Laurel, where he's won 4 or 5 starts, had a bit of an excuse in the lone loss, and there have been a couple layoffs in there, but since he switched into the Ned Allard barn for his last couple of races this winter at Laurel, he's just posted buyer speed figures that make him the standout in this field.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's just a hard horse to sort of move beyond in this race, David, because he's run nothing but good races. He's fastest on the way in. And he's just got that kind of tactical speed that's going to lead to most likely a really good trip in this race. And, he just makes too much sense. I get that he's, got a ship now and, take his game to a totally different track. And I would also just point out that it's at least worth watching most of his races because he's a little bit goofy, even still after 5 starts. The win 2 starts back, I know it was off a layup, but he's got a little bit of greenness and a little bit of quirkiness to him that I don't love. But man, all of his races are good.
Well, Mike, let's go to your grid first. And I know you have plenty of respect for this horse. I'm going to elaborate on that point you just made when I get to my grid about, the goofiness of Quince Brew. But based on pure talent, I mean, he seems like the right horse in this race. Yeah. It's just a matter of what kind of trip you think he's going to work out because he has set some pretty moderate paces in his last couple of wins.
It's true. That's true, David. I just feel like when I look at him, I don't think of him as a speed horse when I watch his races, even though he's on the lead in several of them. I just don't look at him as a speed horse. Even that last race, I know it was on a wet track, but he they just sort of pulled his way into position up there, but he looked comfortable to me doing it. We'll see. I thought there was a good trip coming for him. And the other horse for me, the longer I looked at it, the more that I liked Full Moon Madness. And we'll see if it all actually really does finally come together for this horse. He's obviously really well bred. I always felt like he had potential and things just didn't quite work out for him as a 2-year-old. Well, a 2-year-old, I guess I shouldn't say that. He ran fine as a 2-year-old. As a 3-year-old, he never really got the chance to develop, in my opinion. And then, going forward, I just feel like he's getting better now. I think there's a real chance that he takes another step forward. And I liked his last race. I feel like I can make excuses. Maximus Meridius beat him in the 2 stakes tries, 2 and 3 back. I feel like I can make excuses for Full Moon Madness. I thought he ran well in those races. So he was the other key for me in this race. I didn't, totally leave out the sort of informed now horse down on the rail, Crazy Mason, who just put in 2 really big finishes in his 2 most recent starts. I don't love him in here, but I don't want to get beat by him.
Yeah, and as we go to my grid for this race, I'm going to have both of your horses in, well, the use and defend spots. I'm not leaving them off completely, but I have minor knocks against each of them. With Quince Brew, Mike, you mentioned the goofiness that he showed in the stretch of some of his races. He seems like a horse that doesn't like to get hit with the riding crop because he's changed leads. He ducks in whenever the rider goes to it. You could see Michael Sanchez kind of learned that lesson too back because he really didn't strike him with the whip last time when he won the General George, just kind of showed it to him throughout the stretch. So maybe it's a positive sign that he's now had this rider on a few times who seems like he's learning his quirks. But I do wonder, getting into a more competitive spot, if he's going to have to ask this horse a little harder than he has in the last couple of races. And if he really has to get set down, is he going to run straight? How is he going to react to the jockey applying more pressure? That's my reservation with him. But I do respect the fact that he's done well over wet tracks because we haven't mentioned it yet, but there is plenty of weather predicted this Saturday in New York. I mean, it remains to be seen how much rain is going to come, but it does feel like there's going to be at least some precipitation on Wood Memorial Day. And obviously it's not going to matter for turf racing. There is none carded on this card, but for the dirt track, it probably is going to be sealed, maybe wet. And Quince Brew has already shown that he can handle it. As far as Full Moon Madness, the 4, and Maximus Meridius, the 7, who are coming out of some similar races, I did prefer Maximus Meridius because I just trust him a little bit more to get his preferred trip. He breaks sharply from the gate, which is something that has been a problem for Full Moon Madness. Sometimes that Michelle Nevin trainee can be a step slow from the starting gate, and breaking in the midst of this field, I wonder if that pushes him a little bit out of position early. And Maximus Meridius, he's just got that good tactical speed. He's shown that the 7 furlongs, at least as he's gotten to be an older horse, is no problem for him anymore, where I think early in his career, maybe 7 was a bit of a stretch for Maximus Meridius. These days, it feels like he handles it. And I just can envision Rosario playing the break, not getting too aggressive, perching him outside of maybe the favorite and getting the right kind of trip with him. So I respect him quite a bit, but I do want to have that now horse that you mentioned, the number 1 Crazy Mason, in the key slot, because I don't quite know how good this horse is ultimately going to turn out to be in the stakes ranks as a sprinter, but we're not going to show any replay footage in these Pick 5 videos, but you should do yourself a favor and go back in your formulator or Timeform US past performances, or even on the NYRA website, and take a look at the replay of Crazy Mason's last race, because it's one of those you kind of have to see to believe. He looked like he was getting eased in the early portions of that race, just completely off the screen, and as soon as he comes into the picture, it's like, what's the Trevor Denman cliche? He jumped in at the quarter pole and just ran by these horses. That's the kind of race that points a horse out that maybe things have just really clicked, turning him back to become a sprinter when he's able to unleash that kind of run, because there was no pace for him to close into. And you look at the Timeform US pace figures for that race, it's almost unbelievable that he was able to achieve the late pace numbers that he did coming home. I think he's super dangerous in here. We'll see if he can do it going 7 furlongs in a race that, again, doesn't look like it features a ton of pace, but I was hoping to get, I've got him at 5-1 on the line. I was hoping to get a fair enough price on Crazy Mason. Mike, I don't know if you have any more to add, any other horses you want to throw in the mix. I think you had Donegal Momentum in there somewhere, but he's a horse that has some questions to answer as well.
He does. I don't think we should go too much longer on this race. I just have 2 questions for you. One, as far as Maximus Meridius goes, how concerned are you about that last race over at Parks? And I mean, to me, I watched that race, like I get that the horse to beat him is a Ness claim, that was his 6th win in a row. He was in really good form. Maximus Meridius, you can't lose that race. In my opinion, you just can't lose that race. I really don't want to bet him back off of that one. And the other question I was going to ask you is just about Donegal Momentum. I mean, I get that he's bred for turf and he's obviously good on turf. I thought he was good on dirt too. This is the kind of race where I feel like he's talented enough to go with some horses who just aren't super, super strong sprinters.
Yeah, I'll just quickly answer both of those. I did kind of gloss over the last performance for Maximus Meridius, but you don't like when a horse loses at 1-20. I will say 2 things were going on in that race. He was getting Lasix for the first time. Who knows? Not every horse loves Lasix. Yep. Maybe he reacted badly to it. And also, it's a race at Parks. The track was a little dead that day. I just never want to hold Parks' performances against horses too much, especially when they've already run well in New York. And as far as Donegal Momentum goes, yeah, he was really impressive on debut. And I think the prospect of a wet sealed track might really move him up, because I think he is a horse that has more of that turf inclination that really moves better over a wet track that we saw in his debut than he did in his subsequent dirt races. I like him more as a turf horse, but I think the prospect of it coming up wet does make him a little bit more interesting than than I initially might have given him credit for. Let's move on to the next race in this sequence. The middle leg, race 11, is the Excelsior. This one carded at 1.25 miles this year. Another field of 8 runners signed on here, Mike. And I think that there are 3 main players in this race: Batten Down, Mazmac, and Krupe. They're the 3 shortest prices on my morning line. And Batten Down is probably the horse of that crew that is sort of the key to this race, because during his 3-year-old season, he looked like the type that might be capable of taking a real step forward when he turned 4. He was chasing home the likes of Fierceness, Sierra Leone, Torpedo Anna, knocking on the door in some major races, and running some really nice speed figures when he got in against fields that he could beat. He's been a little disappointing in his last couple of starts. The Discovery pace was strong. He couldn't cope with it. And then last time in the Mine Shaft, I don't think the trip was ideal for him, but I still feel like we need to learn who this horse is and whether he can overcome a little bit of adversity in another race that is supposed to feature an honest pace.
Yeah, I'll agree with most of that take on Batten Down. And he's a horse I definitely want to use in here. I don't want to get beat by him. I have my some reservations regarding him, just mostly because of most of the stuff that you just laid out there, David. I know that he's talented. When they did, step him up at Saratoga to try the really top 3-year-olds, to me, it was just a situation where he just wasn't good enough. I mean, he looked to me like he was totally overmatched by them. Not that that's a bad thing, because they're really good horses, but just wasn't good enough. The other reservation I have about him is, so far anyway, when he doesn't make the lead, he's just not as good, and there's a lot of pace in this race.
It does feel that way. I mean, you've got horses like the number 6 Phileas Fogg and the number 7 Mama's Gold, who both look like they need the lead types. And I kind of wonder what's going to happen between the two of them. It's kind of interesting. Romero Mirage is the main rider of both horses. He's going to land on Mama's Gold here, but he certainly knows Phileas Fogg quite well. And the fact that one does seem to need the lead too. So it does feel like Batten Down is just going to be forced into a situation where he's got to sit third to those horses. And we'll see if he's able to cope with that trip. But he certainly has a higher ceiling than a lot of horses in this race if he's able to produce that top effort. Mike, let's take a look at your grid for this race. And I know you've got Batten Down in the U slot, as I do as well. But I think we were both looking for value in other places.
Yeah, we'll see. Listen, I think I'll give my two main takes of this race, and then I'll let you go here, David. First of all, I'm just against Mazmac. I know that he can win, and maybe there's a good trip coming for him in here. I'm not totally convinced by this horse, and I feel like this is the toughest race he's been in so far. At one of the shorter prices in here, I'm against him, and I'm just going to try to let him beat me here, going 1.25 miles. I think Krupe is the horse to beat in this race. There is a scenario here where he's the only key for me in this race, and I really lean on him quite a bit in here. I just think he's the best horse in the race, and the distance helps him. But I did want to leave Classic Catch. I went back and forth between putting him in the use column and the key column. I'm going to keep him in the key column just for this race. He's going to be a great price in here. He might finally get some pace to run at here, which he has not been able to get, particularly in the first 2 starts this year. He's in a 3-horse field and a 4-horse field. Nobody, that doesn't work against anybody more than it works against this horse. And I just feel like, David, going into last year, I feel like he was on the cusp of getting a lot better. As a 4-year-old, he had a tough trip at Churchill, and then I think something went wrong there at Saratoga. He really lunged badly at the start and then had a really tough trip after that. I feel like maybe something went wrong there, and he had a missed time. I want to give this chance. I think he'll get the distance. He's going to have some pace to run into, and he's going to be a price.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I gave Classic Catch a long look in here because I agree with all those points you made about his prior races and the distance. I just wish he was in better form, because I watched the last few races and I tried him a couple times in those races against weaker fields, and I just wanted to see him do a little bit more running to suggest that he still was that same horse as early in his career. But look, he's probably going to be the biggest price of anybody on the board here, despite the fact that he's going out for some top connections. So I like the fact that you put him in the key column, because I know you look at this exercise in a similar way that I do. The most likely winners don't have to be in your key slot. We're looking for horses that are going to offer the best value, and those are the horses that we want to key on in these pick 5 wagers to ensure that the potential payout is worthwhile for us. I did narrow it down to just Krupe in here, Mike, and I wonder what price do you think he's going to be in here? I made him the third choice behind Batten Down and Mazmac, just given his recent form and some of the disappointing efforts. I'm kind of hoping that's the case, but as I handicap it more, I wonder if people might land on him due to the class. What was your take on the price of these horses, if you have an opinion about it?
Listen, I'm the wrong guy to ask about that stuff. And luckily for me, I don't really have to think about it because you make the morning line in New York and it's a really, really good one. So listen, I don't think about it that much. I kind of thought it would be Batten Down, Krupe, as the sort of the two shortest prices in the field. But I don't really have a hot take on it.
Yeah, I'm kind of scared by the money that Mazmac has taken in his last couple of races because I think I've had him maybe at twice the prices that he's gone off at on the morning line the last couple of times, and he has just taken a ton of money. The bettors have pounded him in his last couple of victories, and they've been right. But I agree with your take on the number 8 Mazmac. I think he's gotten perfect trips against weaker fields, and to me, he's got to prove it that he can, number 1, go 10 furlongs, and 2, step up against some proven stakes horses. So getting back to the number 4 Krupe, he's my only key horse in this race, Mike. I can even make some minor excuses for some of those off-the-board finishes recently. He got bumped hard in the stretch of the Clark cutoff at the end of that race. He probably was going to finish third without that trouble. The Pegasus, again, was the exact same thing. He got bumped between horses at the top of the stretch. He wasn't going to hit the board, but he was trying at the end of that race. And you know this horse is always going to deliver that finish when he gets to be held up early. And it feels like there will be pace for him in this race with those speeds that I mentioned to the outside. So he's my one key horse. I did want to throw the number 5 Curbstone into the use slot. And I even toyed with the idea of putting him in the key position because he is going to be a big price in here, Mike. He's not quite fast enough to beat a field like this when you look at all of his speed figures and his entire body of work, but he is a horse that really is at his best going longer distances like this. So if it comes apart at the end, I think that Curbstone is going to get into the mix. Can he win the race? I don't know. Maybe it's the kind of horse you want to use underneath in, exactas and trifectas more so, but I did want to highlight him at least in this exercise.
Yeah, I'm a Curbstone fan as well, and I agree with you about the distance with him. It's the longer the better for that horse. I just happen to go with a different price horse as my other use there.
Well, let's move on to the main event of this sequence. Race 12 is the Grade 2 Wood Memorial, a 12-horse field here, and it's an interesting one to handicap because you've got a couple of horses drawn down towards the inside who are probably going to take some money, and the number 1 Rodriguez and the number 2 Captain Cook. We'll see which one of those two ultimately goes favored if it is one of those. But there are cases to be made for a lot of horses in this field, Mike. There are plenty of up-and-comers trying stakes company for the first time that look like they still have upside. So many ways to go. And it feels like the kind of race where if you can land on a position and you feel good about it, maybe that's your edge in this sequence, because I would imagine that a lot of people that are handicapping this pick 5 might be tempted to make this a spread race.
Yeah, exactly. And you're 100% right about that, David. And that's why I kept going back and looking at this race, because I want to have a strong opinion in here. And I just don't. There's nobody that I really have strong feelings about in this race. Obviously, you and I did a longer video just on this race that people can go check out to get our full thoughts on the entire field. I just really struggled with it, starting with the 2 favorites down in post 1 and 2. And listen, they obviously can both win, and maybe they'll just complete the exacta in here. Maybe they both landed in a really good spot. I just don't love either one of them. For my pick 5, I wound up splitting them, preferring Captain Cook maybe a little bit more to Rodriguez. So it's not that I'm against Rodriguez necessarily, David. I know that he can win this race. I just don't want to bet him, especially if he's the favorite. I don't want to bet him. I have him in the defend column? Do I want to have him somewhere in case everything else breaks right for me in this pick 5? Yeah, I'd like to have Rodriguez on a ticket. I really don't want to have a ton of money invested in this horse, either in the win pool or in the pick 5 pool.
Yeah, that's fine. And if you don't love a horse, leave him off your ticket or throw him in the defend column if you've got prices you like in other legs, and you're not going to get totally knocked out by him if you're right in all 4 of the other races. But you don't have to make him a key or a use horse just because you think he's got a likelihood to win this race. If the price isn't right, then you do want to downgrade a horse like that. That's sound strategy for putting together multi-race sequences. And Mike, you do have a couple long shots in the key slot in McAfee and Statesman. I agree with you on one of them. Not quite. I couldn't quite get to McAfee, but if he runs here, he is going to be a pretty big price, just given the competitive nature of this race. Before I talk about my sequence, I'll let you finish up those 2.
Wanted to give a real shot to McAfee, just because you're right that he may be a bit of a reach here. I do think he has talent, though, and I think there were just enough things working against him before the Gotham, and then I didn't like the trip that he got in the Gotham. So I'm interested in him stretching. Now, Statesman, I just think he's really coming around for Shug, and I like the distance for him. He's going to need a trip from out there. He's going to need some pace to come after. But I definitely want to use that horse. I think he has a chance to turn out to be really good. The toughest call for me was the 6 Hill Road for Chad Brown. I just don't know how good he is, David. I don't necessarily want to get beat by him, but I don't love him either. I just threw him in the used column.
Yeah, we have a similar take on Statesman. We showed the replay of his last race in that longer Wood Memorial Stakes preview that you mentioned. It's one that you want to check out. He was really visually impressive at Tampa Bay Downs, just stepping way up in class against a much tougher field in this Wood Memorial. And as I was kind of putting together by key use defend grid for this race, Mike, while I recognize, as you were saying, that Rodriguez and Captain Cook can certainly win this race, I just didn't see either one of them as offering value in here. And I thought that I was going to like Captain Cook way more than I did when I went to handicap this race. But the buyer for the Withers, while it makes him one of the horses to beat, he got such a perfect trip in there. I wonder, with a very different trip here, breaking from the inside with so much speed drawn to his outside, if he's going to be able to produce that same performance. And I just found myself wanting to downgrade him a little bit, liking other horses more. I've got that horse that you mentioned, the number 6 Hill Road in there. I think he's going to finally appreciate getting some pace in here. I don't know if he's going to be much of a price, because I think a lot of people hold that opinion, and he was the 3rd place finisher in last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile, so he's not exactly flying under the radar for a popular barn, but I do think it's sound logic that he's going to do better in a race with pace. I even think Sand Devil is a horse that a lot of people are just jumping off the bandwagon, and I don't want to completely write him off yet, because I do think he's got talent. Maybe the 9 furlongs is too much of a stretch for him, but he fits here on speed figures. And I just think he's a horse that maybe the foundation is going to work into his advantage here as he tries to stretch out for Linda Rice, who has put some pretty rigorous drills into him coming into this race. But as I kept going back and forth with these contenders, I just came to the decision that I wanted to really lean on the number 7 Grande. And we'll see what price he is. I'm kind of hoping he's the 4th choice among this quartet of horses that I think is going to be somewhere in the single digits. And he's got to run a little faster, Mike, but he just looks to me like a horse that has been way better than his competition in his first 2 starts. He does like to race up close to the pace, but I don't think he necessarily needs that trip, because he's very handy. He doesn't get rank. And when he gets to the front, it looks like he idles a little bit. So I think there might be a little bit more there. There's going to have to be, but I'm not worried about the distance at all with him. He seems to have all the stamina in the world. So I just came to the idea that I would want to lean on this 9-2 to 5-1 shot if he is indeed that price.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. He was another tough call for me. There are things I like about him, and there are things I don't like about him. He was one of the horses that I sort of slotted more as a backup here. I don't love him, but I'm not way against him either.
Well, Mike, let's move on to the final leg of this sequence. It is the only non-stakes event in this pick 5. It's a New York bred allowance optional claimer, 2nd level allowance, $45,000 is that optional claiming tag. And I think we're going to have a pretty big favorite here, and potentially a lean for a lot of people that are playing this pick 5 sequence. That is, of course, the number 3 Dolomite, who I said is the even money morning line favorite in here, despite it being a large field of 11 runners. And she has just been very popular with the bettors really throughout her entire career, Mike, but especially in her last couple of starts at this level since coming back from a layoff. And she's run fine, but she's still lost both of those races at odds-on prices. And I think you have to ask yourself if you want to take another short price on a horse that probably has to run a little bit better.
Yeah, very, very fair. My position on her is that a big part of me feels like she's just going to win this race. And, we'll see. I get the reservations about her. I have 2 opinions about her. One is that I think she's a sprinter, and I know that she's run well going longer in the past. I think she's a sprinter. And since she's come back from the layoff, I don't know, man. I think she's run fine, even though she lost at short prices both times, particularly, and you can comment on this now too, David. I mean, that last race, she was disappointing. Yes, I really do not care for the trip or ride that she got in that race.
It was a day where it felt like being towards the inside, maybe it was a slight advantage. I don't think it was a huge bias. And she was just wide every step of the way, lost some position coming to the quarter pole. And when she finally got to the outside, it just felt like she had lost ground with others cutting the corner at the quarter pole, and she had too much to do in the final 1/8 of a mile. She was finishing at the end, though. So I hear you with her being better going shorter. I mean, she's definitely achieved better results in those races. The speed figures say that she's run just fine going longer, but that's not always indicative of what horses want to do with as they mature, as they get older. So I don't know, Mike. I'm not totally with you on that assessment, but I could see the logic going in that direction. My thing was she's just going out for connections that can never take in enough money in New York. She's been these crazy short prices that didn't make sense to me the last couple of times. And I think she's going to be another one here, just given the competitive nature of this race, and that it's the last race in a pick 5 sequence where a lot of people probably spread in the Wood Memorial are going to be looking for a lean. So we can go to your grid first. And I know you've got her in the key slot, but there is another horse that you want to upgrade that is probably going to be better value.
Yeah, I'm just not against the likely favorite in here, Dolomite, and I'm gonna definitely make her a key. And here, there's a scenario here, David, where I would just be happy if I got alive into the 3 and the 6 in here. I'd be happy with that and just take my chances with those 2 horses. The 6, obviously, Sweetest Princess, the other horse for me who just to me dirtied up. Going to be a fair price in this race. Just been running in one race for about a year now, just in one race after another that is too tough for her. And she's finally back in the right kind of a spot here. She's good enough to beat these horses. The distance is fine for her. So I just thought she was super interested in here, the kind of horse I want to bet to win in this race. But I also definitely want to key her in a race like the pick 5. I got a few horses in there that I could defend with if I needed to. Again, there's a chance that I just use the 3 and the 6 in here and take my chances. I did want to give a little respect to Sahana, the 10 here, though. This is a long layoff. She's a horse who I think is better than she looks on paper.
Yeah, I gave Sohana a look as well. For those connections, I set her as the second choice on the morning line. I wonder if she's going to drift up from there at all, because it does feel like this might be a race where they lean on Brown and Cox, and some other horses fall through the cracks a little bit. You can see as we look to my grid of this race, I agree with you on the number 6, Sweetest Princess. I think that she is super interesting. When you just glance at her form, it might seem like she's completely lost it recently, but she was way against a bias 3 back, and she's just been against way tougher competition the last couple of times. She's dropping and she's getting back to a distance that works for her. So I think we've got a very similar opinion on her. And the other horse that I wanted to upgrade into the key slot is the number 4, Nolita, who does have to get a little faster if she's going to upset a horse like Dolomite. But Mike, I have just not loved the trips in her last couple of races. I don't know what the plan was back in the mud, where it just seemed like she was never in the right position, trying to search for room. And then last time she just kind of got ridden into traffic in the stretch. And I don't know what it really cost her, but I just never liked where she was positioned in that race. This race is supposed to feature, I hope, a little bit more pace. I think there are some horses that need to get some more aggressive rides in here, especially in the large field. And maybe they spread out a little bit more and she can pick them up at the end, because she's gone 6.5 the last couple of times. She strikes me as the kind of horse that really is going to love the 7 furlongs. That feels like the ideal distance for her, even though she's actually never got it in her career. So I just feel like this might be the right time to hop on the bandwagon with Nolita at what could be a better price than she's been the last couple of races. So they're the 2 for me. I do have Dolomite in the used slot. I've thought about making her a key horse, but at the end of the day, I just don't see value with her. And I don't want to put horses in the key slot that I don't think are going to offer sufficient value. So that's why I downgraded her a little bit. I've got the number 8 Clover Street in there, just a horse that the bettors never seem to go to, but she's been in good form recently. So that's the reason I'm upgrading her a little bit. But I did want to spread a little bit in this race, because kind of going against the grain, I think this is a spot where a lot of people are going to try to go thin, and I just didn't want to rely too heavily on Dolomite.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. I think we both have the 5 Ariana Rye in there as well, David. I got that horse as a little bit of a horse I want to use somewhere too. She's one that I'm actually worried about, the 7 furlongs. I'm not sure that is actually a benefit to her, but man, she's run pretty well recently. Even that last race, I know that she just got to the front and held on, but that pace was solid, man. And she was taking pressure and she held on the entire way.
Yeah, originally I was leaving her off, but then I was thinking about the race 3 back where Nolita beat her by a neck, and you can make the argument that Ariana Rye ran better than Nolita that day. So I agree with you about the pace and the distance. I have reservations, but I had to throw her in there somewhere for that exact reason. Well, let's go to our grids for this race, Mike. We'll throw up yours first, and 2-4 all the way. Those are your numbers on Saturday. But talk a little bit about how you structured this. I know that we've gone back and forth a little bit about this key use defend strategy, and it's not always your style to defend with horses. And I know that's a term that some horse players don't like to use. But talk a little bit about how you might structure this.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't tend to play pick 5s this way. In total, I prefer to play it a little bit different way. But this is the strategy that we use here. I'll be leaning heavily on the horses in the key column for sure. And, obviously I do want to take some backups in some of these races. Again, the key to this whole pick 5 for me, David, is race 12, the Wood Memorial. It's that race where I don't have a strong opinion. I want to use as many of those horses as I can afford to use and just try to survive that race if I can get there, because it's the one race that I feel like could really trip me up.
Yeah, and this key use defend strategy, it's meant to be flexible. It is kind of based on the idea of ABC that Steve Christ has written extensively about, but you don't have to play it that way. If you're somebody who just likes to hammer your opinions and you just want to play an all keys ticket, maybe that's the way for you. And it's going to, maybe you can play it with a lower budget, or maybe if you have more to play with, you increase the base value of that wager. So you really do put a lot more money through those opinions. This is flexible. We're not trying to give out one ticket that we say, this is exactly the way you have to play.
Right.
We're just trying to indicate these are our opinions and you should play with the strategy that works for you. And with that in mind, we could take a look at my strategy grid for this race. And, Mike, I'm trying to go a little bit thinner in some races where I think some are going to be tempted to spread, particularly the Wood Memorial. I'm going to try to be right about Grande. And I think that I'm structuring the first few legs that I feel pretty good about at least getting to that opinion. And if I'm right, then maybe I can have some of that coverage in the last leg to those value horses that I highlighted outside of Dolomite. But I feel at least pretty good about the opinions in those first 3 stakes races. And hopefully that pace does develop for the number 4 Krupe, the other horse that I kind of have as that one single key horse in the sequence along with Grande. I can never be too sure about paces developing in New York, but that one kind of feels like it does have to come to fruition if the field holds together after scratches. So that's how I'm looking to do it. But we'd love to know how you're going to play this pick 5 sequence on Saturday. Drop us a comment, maybe put your pick 5 grid down there. Let us know who your key horses are. Do you disagree or agree with any of the opinions that we put forth? We would love to hear from you in the comments of this video. Mike, thanks for joining for another one of these pick 5 videos. And everybody, good luck if you're playing Aqueduct this Saturday.